How's everybody this morning?
How are you?
Good. Just before we get started, a couple things, people that I just want to thank, and then we'll go over just some season in review, next season, some future stuff, and then get to questions, whatever you guys want to talk about. Obviously, we'll cover whatever you want to talk about. As I said before, we've packed a lot into 15 years, and we're looking forward to the next 15, but that is a result of all the different people that have touched the Thunder in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, our players are the most important people in the organization and also in the history of the organization. I also want to just specifically thank the fans that were at the airport the last couple times. We know that there's a lot of people that probably would like to be there because we have fans all over the world, and we have fans all over the state. But the effort and the commitment and the fandom that it takes to do something like that is not lost on anybody, and we'll never, ever take that for granted. I really feel like those people are just representative of the kind of the diehards that exist. And I think it makes a big impression on the players because a lot of these guys have grown up watching the Thunder because, you know, like I said earlier, 15 years, there's no way to cut it. It's been a little while. And I feel like that was probably this iteration's first exposure to what it's like to be a Thunder player and what that entails. I also want to thank everybody that fan-wise that stood and claps for those Thunder legacy guys. As I said before, the most important people in the history of the Thunder are our players. And so just the recognition that all of these guys have passed through the doors is super valuable. And I feel like those are the true blue people that really, they love the Thunder in all of its warts. You know, doesn't matter. If you wore the jersey, we're with you. I think in a small city like this, that really makes a difference. And so I want to point that out. And then to the fans that stood this season as a result of maybe a Kenrich Williams deflection or a J. Will charge or a Lou Dort dive on the floor or Isaiah Joe 3 that sent the other team to a timeout, and they felt compelled to stand and clap. We're super grateful for that. We want to have and build a home court advantage that is going to help us win a lot of games. And those people that are doing those things on the smallest levels really add up and help make the experience for our players unique. So we want to just make sure that we acknowledge those people. I also want to thank the media, everybody that's in the room, everybody that covers the team. You guys are an important part to telling the story of the team and serve a great purpose for the organization, even if we don't always agree with everything that you say or do. But it's a critical function to what it is that goes on with us as a part of the community. So just jumping into the season in review, last fall, I guess September, the last time that we were here, I talked a little bit about the bandwidth that I thought the team could potentially capture. I talked about the fact that there's probably a high end and then there's an equally low end as a result of the fact that the team is young and the team has, had relative inexperience, still has relative inexperience. But, and I laid out the fact that there's certain things that tend to work against young teams in the NBA. I see some head nodding, so there must have been you must have been awake for that part. But things that get in the way of young teams are pretty consistent, and they're not always talent-based. But I thought our guys did an excellent job with some of these things. The first thing was a lot of times the headwind is personal ambition, statistics, awards, things of that nature. Another thing would be just a hard time internally communicating person to person. That's kind of hard when you're 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. There are people that are 50 years old that have a hard time communicating. So it's hard for young people in this type of environment to do that. I thought our guys did a good job with that. There's so many outside voices in the NBA, I call them the silent forces of the NBA, that may have the best interest of the players in mind, but maybe not the best interest of the team. And so the ability to manage those relationships and see those things for what they were and not allow that to affect what we're trying to get done as a collection of people. I thought our guys did a good job with that. Understanding that the season is full of lulls and fits and starts, and seeing the season as a process and not necessarily evaluating every game or every week, because that's just the sign of the reeking of inexperience. The guys, I think, understood that you got to evaluate it kind of month to month to really understand where you're at. They did a great job with that. And I mentioned physicality a few times last time as well. I thought we made strides in that area. I'll talk about this a little bit later as well. We have more to do there, but I think we did. I think we made strides in that area as well. So I thought the guys did a good job with priorities. And I think that's, in addition to just like internal development and player development, part of the reasons why we were able to achieve what we achieved this year in terms of progress. I also talked at the beginning of the preseason about the fact that our rate of learning would have to outpace our aging experience. That was another thing. I don't see as many nods here, so obviously at that point I lost you. But the point there is, when you have a young team, part of the way you make up for some of the gaps that you're going to have is how quickly do you adapt? How quickly do you learn? That's a really important part of development, team development as well as personal development. And I thought our guys learned along the way and could apply that stuff pretty quickly. And I was really impressed with that. Those are pretty good traits. Now, all of these things I just mentioned, they're going to be on the docket for us to continue to manage and corral for quite a long time, until they become habitual. But this was a good starting point for us, and I thought the guys continued to learn. And part of it's because of the situations that they were put in. I also think that Mark did a great job of not blasting through adversities, but taking time to explain and unpack why they may be happening and how they can be utilized down the road for improvement. Again, part of seeing the season in segments and not just in these bite-sized hot take moments. I think that was really important. I talk all the time with the staff, and have for years, about this theory of, in order to, it's kind of like natural selection for the NBA, but in order to make it, first you have to have instincts as a player and as a team. And that's kind of keeps you surviving. If you have reasonable instincts, that affords you experiences. If you are a good learner, you can accumulate the experiences, good and bad, learn from them, and then eventually over time you can funnel those into wisdom. And if you collect enough of that wisdom, eventually that leads to poise during uncertainty. And we're seriously still in the experience gathering phase, but I do think we're learning from those effectively, and hopefully down the line in the future we'll be able to look back and say, well, we have some wisdom as a result of this. We've seen this situation before. We've been in this dynamic before. There's no way for us to speed that up. There's no way for us to slow that down. That's going to present itself as it should, however it may be. More on this season, I thought the play style continued to grow and evolve. I do think that a lot of the progress that we saw this season in that respect is all linked back to what we were able to get accomplished in the 2020-21 season. And I do think it's important to point out that season, the 2021, we got so much accomplished in that year. And I think probably for people that don't do this for a living, they may not understand or see that. But many of the things that people were praising this year had nothing to do with this year. They were things that were being discussed, molded, sculpted, pressed in that period of time that allowed us to execute or implement some things now. And so I don't think that should be forgotten. And there'll be things hopefully that we accomplish this year that may be invisible now that could show up at a later date. And that's why we talk about things being in sequence, things compounding, and taking a long lens on the development of the team and the players. Our shooting took a big jump. We were last in the league in three-point shooting last year. I think we're middle of the pack now. I don't know the decimal points and how close we are to maybe either side of that, but we're somewhere in the middle. Our bench shooting obviously took a big jump as a result of Isaiah, and that's great. But I think the real question is why is that the case? And the big part of that is the shots that we're getting and the way they're generated. And then when we're playing really well, it allows us to make more shots. So you can look at a shot chart and they can be coming from the right places, but that's kind of a very shallow way to look at that because it's how are they being delivered, what is the timing of that, what's happened in the possession before that. It's not just launching them from where they are, it's what's leading up to that. And I thought our lead up to our and the shots we were generating were much improved in terms of just the rhythm in which we were playing, and that helped. Physically, we talked about this. A lot of people think about physicality, and they think about one side of the ball. They think about defense. Offensively, I think there's room for us to get more physical. You can see that at the free throw line. We were last in the league of getting into the bonus before our opponent. That's not a place you want to be. We spent about a minute per game where the other team was in the bonus and we were not. 4 minutes per game, a minute per period. So 4 minutes a game where we get fouled, we don't shoot, they get fouled, they shoot. And I think everybody knows that, we play downhill. We're I said this to someone the other day, we're downhill like a Warren Miller movie, for those of you old enough to know what that is. And we got to get something for that. And big part of that is physicality with the ball. I think Josh specifically, because he's as big as he is, sometimes he's got to figure out a way to turn those fouls into calls, and we got to do a better job with that. And then defensively, we have to. We're always going to need more nasty. There's no question about that. And so we have to be able to dial that up when needed, but also play in control. But physicality. And then nasty, we have to have that if we're going to play in big games and succeed. Our net rating went from, I think it improved 9 points or something like that. Probably won't see that again, and a big part of that is because of where it was, quite frankly. But it was a significant jump. Again, I'm less concerned with what happens. I'm very, very concerned with how it happens. And the jump on that is pretty simple. We were able to get those numbers going in the right direction because of internal growth and development of our players, and the fact that we had some guys that had been steadily improving over years, and then a few guys that steadily improved over games, is what gave us the jump that we got. And if you really think about the teams that we've had here, the through line for a lot of the jumps in net rating or even the sustaining of net rating has been through the internal development that we've had, player development-wise, over the last 15 years. And this kind of played out similarly. I do think with respect to that, again, going back to the rate of learning, the guys were not put in comfortable positions over the last few years, and there was a lot of concern about that. And I mentioned in these conferences that we can't bubble wrap everybody. Like, they're going to have to face steep circumstances. They're going to have to compete, and they're going to have to learn that you get your ass kicked sometimes. And if you don't, if you do, how do you respond to that? And I thought we had some good response. I thought that, again, we didn't make it easy on the guys, whether it was, we traded for Kemba Walker. We did not bring Kemba Walker in. We kind of, even though I think it would, yes, he could have helped us in some ways, but we needed that experience for the guys that we were moving forward with. And the fruits of those situations and circumstances that they were placed in, I think we saw that this year, specifically with Shea, but also with other players as well. And when you're put in those adverse situations, you compensate and you learn and you figure out how to do it as a team. So I think that was really important for us. Turning to next season, this will be our third draft in this kind of sequence that we're in as a team. So we're excited about that. At the same time, you've heard me say this for 15 years. Every season, you go back to square one. I think you probably heard that from the guys too. You go back to square one. Whether we won 60 games, Western Conference Finals, or we won 20 games, we have to start over. And that's what teams are, and that's how you build these types of endurable habits that we want to have. You don't carry that with you. So it's going to get harder for us. There's no question about it. And the only way to solve that problem is to go back to square one and start figuring out how to be the best team we can by the end of 82 games and flush whatever happened, previous. I think the guys, again, on the learning component, I think they learned how long the season is. Not just physically, mentally, and emotionally, no question about that. Again, conscious discomfort, you have to go through these things. You have to experience them. You can't just tell people about that. They have to go through that, and they have to build the endurance to deal with it. I think they also learned that the sky falls on every NBA team at least 2 times a year. So over 82 games, you will not play well for 82 games. You may play horrible for weeks. It may be a month. You don't want to have several months, but every team, the teams that are still playing right now, the sky fell on this season, and everybody freaked out. And the teams that have sophisticated competitiveness to them understand that while you're going through that, that's the solution. The regression is, okay, you have to keep pounding through this and working through it. And I think if you have the right principles, the right mentality, and the right temperament, you can work through that and become a better player and a better team as a result of that. And I think our guys figured that out. So there's going to be lulls. Can you play through the lulls? Can you block out the noise? Can you not become part of the audience? Can you still maintain the perspective of the competitor and not the observer? Because that's your only solution, is to work through it. I think we did that several times this year, quite frankly. I was very impressed with that, both the players and the coaches. One specific example was actually early in the year. We had a trip. We went to Milwaukee and Detroit. We had started the season almost, I think, the play style was very idealistic. We were in a good spot there. Irrespective of the outcomes, you could tell that we were progressing. We got off track on that trip for whatever reason, and we were able to snap back quickly after that. I think we had maybe one off day of practice. I don't even know if we had a practice, but we played. The next game was against Milwaukee. We went double overtime with them and ended up losing the game, but we were back to the brand of basketball. Even if it wasn't being executed perfectly, the intentions were back to where we need them to be, and we did that really quick. And for a young team, in my experience, that could take weeks. It took a couple days. And I think that was very promising, because it shows, A, the guys intellectually are getting that, and then also there's an intention and a want to do it the right way. But it's hard, because in order to do that, you have to override all these other ways you've been thinking or doing things for a long time. It's not just make a choice. You have to make that choice and override the other habit you might have had previously. So I thought it was really impressive. Play style wise, like I said before, we figured it out through the season and we're going to have to do that every season because the team is going to change as a result of the players improving and getting better. So we're in, I always say observation mode, but we have to continue to observe and see how the team is continually kind of improving and changing. We're at our best when everyone knows, when whoever's on the floor knows their function, isn't trying to redefine their function, and isn't trying to expand their function. When that's happening, we have a chance to play at a really, really high level. That's hard to do. I thought our guys did a really good job with it because the goal isn't to have great individual performances. The goal is to have everybody playing well together in one totality. If we can do that, that's hard to do, but to me, we figured out ways through the year to do that. I'll give you one example. When J-Dub started to emerge and improve at a pretty significant rate, the team had to absorb his improvement in a way that didn't compress or stifle other people, right? So how do you play well together, not just can you get great individual performances? That's where I'd like the team to ultimately get to, and to be able to correct those things and figure those things out in time. And I think we're on our way to doing that. I also thought that we didn't let, beginning of the season, obviously Chet had an injury. There was impending doom on the team, and it was the end of the world. We never really responded to that as a team. I think the guys did a good job not allowing themselves to be channeled or changed by arbitrary expectations. I thought the coaches did a good job of that. Probably the most important aspect of that, in my opinion, is that we maintain like a beginner's mindset. We were open. Usually when you have something like that, that's these expectations that are arbitrary and just kind of thrown out there with no real purpose other than someone's got to say something. You can allow that to affect your work, your craft. And I thought we did a good job of shutting that out and taking a beginner's mindset of, okay, without judgment, what can we do and what should we try here? Because we need to learn as much as we can. And when you're thinking about trying to meet arbitrary expectations, you will shortcut things. You will make poor decisions, and you won't be as instinctive because, they talk about beginner's mindset or childlike mindset. You're just doing things and trying things and figuring them out and learning. And when you have a young team, it's like a young person. You can learn real fast. My kids, I can't believe how quickly they learn because there's nothing else interrupting them. They're not thinking about, does anyone think I look, foolish doing this? Like, what if the food's all over my face? They just eat the food. They figure out what they like, what works, what doesn't work. And I think that's important in sports. I think that's important in life. And I thought the team did a good job of maintaining an open mind to the different things that we needed to do. I'll give you one example. If you look at the box score from the first Minnesota game where we started the season, and the last one, there's a lot of differences. In the first one, Isaiah Joe played 11 seconds. Jay Will did not play. Jalen Williams played very briefly, but that part of that was because he got injured. But also, he wasn't playing 30 minutes or something like that. He probably would have played 15 minutes. Jalen Williams didn't start. The team from that point to the end of the season was a completely different team. If we were trying to race against arbitrary timing or arbitrary expectations that are set for us, we wouldn't have gotten to those things. And so a lot of credit to the coaches and the players for seeing the season as a real marathon and maintaining a real open perspective. And so the development of the team happens in that environment, and I have to continue to try to create that environment. One of the things I say to the coaches, and I've said since I've done this job, is do not fear the outcomes. The outcomes will come downstream from the decisions that we make. Let's make quality decisions. Let's ask the right questions. Let's define the problems and then move from there. The outcomes are only going to teach us those things. Unfortunately, as human beings, we react to them, and we have to be good about not doing that over the course of time. So looking forward, I said this in the fall as well, what we're looking for is consistent performance over a long period of time as a result of continuous improvement and progress. Some years are going to be better than others. I said this. I think I use craft work as the example. Craft work being like the thing that's just mechanical and just runs on its own time. I use some other drummers, I think, probably, because I use analogies and music's a big part of my life. But sometimes you're going to be ahead of the beat and sometimes you're going to be behind the beat. And the key being that at the end, you want to be better, than you were. There's going to be a point in time where we're behind the beat. This year we were Stuart Copeland. We were definitely ahead of it. Like there were some really positive things that were happening. But there's going to be a year where we may not be ahead. We might be behind a little bit. That's okay too. Like I said, resistance, regression, struggle, that's kind of how we've gotten to this point anyway, right? Even in the season, but also individually, the players. We need resistance and friction as human beings to be at our best. If not, unless you're superhuman, your standards will wilt a little bit. And so we're going to welcome that and figure out, how do we define the problems that are creating that, and then we'll get a path to solve them. I think we're really well positioned to deal with whatever comes at us. And I also think this particular group of guys has a chance to win a lot of games together. I think that, and they took their first step on that by making those decisions on the priorities I talked about at the beginning. They can win a lot of games together if they choose to do that. Now, everyone's got to do their job, myself included, the coaches, but I really like the way the conversations are within the building and what they're about and the openness in which we can discuss the things that could potentially get in the way of being the type of team we want to be. And I give them a ton of credit for their maturity, their intellectual maturity. And I think it shows through in the way they play too. But, I think their intentions are in the right spot. I think they're driven. And I think they know that we have a ton of work in front of us. And they're not shying away from that. So just in closing, I talked about the mountain, the second mountain. We're staring that sucker down. We're seeing it, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to find a way to the top of that. I mentioned we have a ton of work to do. No one knows that more than us. We have a ton of humility about what we're trying to do and how challenging it is. We also have a ton of humility about how little we control a lot of this. There's a lot of randomness that goes into this industry, and I hope that's come through in my comments in the past. A lot of the positive things that happened this year, they were not like no one's pressing, levers to make all that happen. There's a lot of randomness and good fortune that has to go into things, and then you have to remember that when you get some tough breaks. I do think it's important to note that the progress that we didn't make by watching the clock. We didn't make that progress by working off somebody else's, arbitrary idea as to when things should or should not be happening. In fact, if we were doing that, I don't think we'd have a 9-point swing in net rating. I don't think we'd be in a playoff, type environment at the end of the season. I don't think we'd be seeing the type of player development improvements that we've made. I think quite the opposite. So we're going to continue to let everybody else watch the clock and create the arbitrary expectations. Our focus is on setting the pace for ourselves, making the best decisions for the organization, no matter how unpopular they may be, taking the criticism for doing those things, and then following through with the mindset that we'll solve it. We'll figure it out together because we have the right people in the building to do that. And, if we have calm persistence and the discipline to resist the path of least resistance, I think we will continue to make progress over the course of time. And with that, I'll let you guys fire away.
before the season. Oh, go ahead.
Before the season, you said save your predictions, burn your assumptions, and I think we're going to make progress this year. I'm confident we are, and we are going to be a better team at the end of the year. You said that after Chet got hurt. What made you so confident that you guys were going to be better?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, the age of the team, right? You have a young team. That there's going to be improvement from that. As long as you can stay open and less judgmental and observe it as it's happening, you'll see some progress. You may not get the results you want right away, but you could see that was going to happen. The other thing is, the things that were put in place in the previous 2 seasons, we're scaling up to be able to see some benefits of that eventually. And so I was confident maybe more in the work that was done the previous 2 years than I was in that particular year, because I'm not ever going to predict what's going to happen. I've done this long enough to know that no one can do that. I'm happy to let other people pretend that they can. I know I can't do that. So I'm never putting myself in that position. I've had players I thought were going to be good that have turned out not to be good. I had players that I didn't think would be good that turned out to be good. We're all guessing to a degree, right? So I wasn't coming across saying I thought we'd be a better team. I didn't know how that would manifest itself.
Sam, you mentioned physicality and nasty. Is that maybe the number one priority in either through the draft or any other acquisition form for you guys as an organization?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say that when I'm talking about that stuff, a lot of times you say physicality, people probably on our team think immediately of Lou or Jay Will. But Isaiah Joe plays physical. So physicality is about what you're bringing to the game as a competitor and whether or not you're putting yourself, the opponent's feeling you, right? And look, we know how we've all seen the NBA work for years. Young teams are going to have to fight a little harder to get the things that we want to get. That's fine. There's no victims here, right? There's no victim. We got to be a little more physical, a little nastier at different situations to be the level team we want to be. So it's more about disposition, I think, than anything. And we made great strides in that. But you're not going to get all the way where you need to go. But as the games get more amplified, your physicality needs to continue to become more amplified. And that's like that's a statement in totality, not like one person or anything like that.
In 3 years, Coach Dagnall goes from G League coach to runner-up for Coach of the Year. What does it mean to see him recognized in this way, and what stands out to you about how he got to this point?
Good. Yeah, I was going to go to the how, because that's, it's nice that he got recognized. I think it's more important to understand, like, the why behind it. Well, I'm happy for him that people are seeing, especially his peers, are seeing the things that he's doing that are effective. Again, I'd say that a lot of the benefits of the year were maybe in his first and second years. There's a lot of really good things that were being implemented that I think are scaling, that can be scaled at this point. And that's why we were so focused and intentional during those years, even though it seemed maybe like we weren't. And that you got to give him the credit for that, because he was able to put those things in place during a period of time where we weren't getting a lot of results, But if you think about the coaches that in the world, when you think of coaches, they're generally thinking in sequence like that. The ones that we, mentally go to in our mind when you think about coaches. So I think he's a good sequential thinker. Obviously, he's got good relationships with the guys. But I mentioned this right after we hired him, and I always laugh because when we remember it took a little while to get through that. and everyone was very concerned like, about how long the search was taking. It was a big topic. The thing about it is he's kind of been here. So he's new to so many people, but I've known him since he's like 26 or 5, because I used to go to Florida and I can remember calling Billy Donovan and asking permission to hire Mark. And I remember interviewing him at Vast, as a matter of fact, and having dinner with him there. I mean, I'm just happy for him. He loves what he does. I think he does a great job. And I think that he speaks the language and is totally aligned with the organization, which I think helps amplify a lot of different aspects of the team. And I think the team is personifying a lot of the values that we hold as a program.
Sam, expectations for the team were pretty low coming into this season, and the team far exceeded them. Now going into next season, it feels like the expectations are much higher. What's your thoughts on that?
Same as I said before, we don't really get ourselves lost in those. If we did last year, I don't, why would we bother coming in to work? The one thing I do think relative to the expectations next year, and I understand that we don't control those. I do think that we still have to remember, as many great things has happened this year, we still have to finish our breakfast around here and understand that we're not a 500 team. So the season is, say, 6 or 7 months long. We had 2 really good months where we played exceptionally well. But we didn't play consistently well the entire. Now, no team's going to do that, as I said before. The sky's going to fall on everybody. But can we be more consistent with our best play? Would be a great step for us. But we're not a 500 team. And I think we have the makings of a team that can be good. I also think that we squeeze a lot of improvement into one season, from 20 games to 40 games. Usually it's a 20, 30. So we're stealing from the future in some way, probably a little bit. So we just have to be at ease with that and understand that. That's not going to change the process we're in. It's not going to say that we're not going to ultimately achieve what we want to achieve. But we do have to kind of understand that there's a lot of work to do. I could go into detail as to like all the different facts as to why that might be the case, but I think everybody understands that we didn't win half our games.
The playing tournament's been around for a few years, but this is the first time you guys have participated. What are your just overall thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, I think it's a good experience. It's hard. Well, so it's hard because you have a personal experience and then you have like the overall experience. I think it's good for the league. I understand why they did it. I was totally supportive of that when they decided to do it. Makes a lot of sense on a lot of levels. For us, I thought it was excellent, but probably not more valuable, but on par with the actual game we played was the last 10 games of the season that we were, like I said, there's conscious discomfort, right? I think that's good. I think it's very hard. I think probably from the outside looking in, there's trepidation. I was like drinking that up because you can to observe how we're performing and preparing in these types of situations. Even if we didn't play our best at certain times, we have to go through that. Very rarely, in my experience in the NBA, just a team just like knife through butter all the way to their goals. It just doesn't work that way. So the fact that we were in those situations and there were some stakes, but most of all, we stuck to kind of the mindset that we had initiated from the start of the season to the end. And it got us there. I would be less excited if we started to make all kinds of sacrifices and compromises in order to get there after putting ourselves in such a good position to have a chance, So I think it's the way we managed through it. That was the best part of it. And the games themselves were great. It's not a series, so you got to get that through your mind. Like, the preparation is much different, and this is something we had to go through. I never experienced it before, but a series is a completely different beast, and this is unfortunately it's really a tournament of randomness, and you got to live with that. But that's what makes it exciting too. We could have very easily, found our way through that. It wasn't meant to be, but I think we'll get a lot out of it.
Everyone's
Was there a moment or a stretch of time when you told that story last year about how when Shea was in the gym the night Russ was traded, how that sort of, you're going to remember that if he turns into something special. Obviously he's done that. Was there a moment when you knew that he could be this kind of player, like first team All-NBA caliber?
Like one specific?
Or, I mean, yeah, if you've got it, but like.
No, I don't. I don't really have one like that. I think I remember a couple things about him, but I don't think they're necessarily like going to lead to this particular question. But my biggest recollections are, one, going to see Kentucky that year. Oh, I saw them a lot because they have so many players. You know what I mean? And I just remember consistently walking away like the guy with the hair, like he had just kind of I was like, he's in the paint a lot. Like I just kind of like, but he wasn't starting. So it was like kind of beat me down over time. And then the other was his first like scrimmage here. We were in the blue practice facility because we were redoing the floor here. And I happened to be walking along the baseline of one of the baselines to go to talk to somebody, and the guys were playing. CP was here. It was that group. It was the first time that group had ever been together. And he made like a finish that was, I thought, pretty unique. I was like, oh, well, that caught my attention. But it wasn't, this guy's going to be an all-star player. That wasn't it. It was that there's tools there. That's different. That was different. When I can't remember how old I was, but one day I was driving along and my phone rang. It was Jerry Krause. And he was older and he was not in great health. But I did not know him. He asked me to come up to his house in Chicago. I feel comfortable telling this story now. Obviously, he's passed away. So I went to his house and we just sat together. And he had a lot of questions for me, and I did not know him. Like, he just wanted to talk ball, right, and scouting. And he was telling me, he's like, "Have you ever?" This guy was a baseball scout too, and he took it so serious. And he was talking about these. He called them like electric moments when you're scouting a player, where you see something, it's a glimpse of something, and you're like, you stand up and you look around and go, I hope no one else saw that. He's got great stories, and because he's watched a lot of players and done a lot of things, and I think like I do kind of understand what he's saying with that. So like when Shea made that finish, it was like a bit of a buzz, like something's going on here, and then you keep doing the rest of your stuff, but that doesn't mean he's going to be. I thought he was going to be this great player, and I never want to act like we had some great idea that he was going to. You observe, you watch, you support, you try to create conditions for the players, and I think you challenge. And I do think that's one thing that sometimes in the league today is missing, is because the playbook in so many ways is to pit the player against the team. In a lot of ways. People are not challenging, and I think I don't think that's a relationship. I think a relationship can't be built on appeasement. No, at least no relationship that I've seen be successful that way. I think you have to be open. You have to work together. You have to challenge and continually raise the bar. And I think that's the best thing about Shea is like he responds well to that, you know. And in the world today, I think it's like the player is a victim of something or the team is a victim, and it's like when you're in a relationship, you're together in that. You work through things together, and you have to talk about that stuff together. And you might disagree about things, but like you got to have the basis of that. And it starts to me with these great players; they all want to be challenged. And I think as soon as you are fearful of that, you can't help them get better. And in my mind, what we need to do as an organization all the time is how do we best serve the players? That doesn't mean fluffy pancakes and car washes. That means how do we help them achieve like their potential and what they want out of it? And sometimes there's friction in that. But, you know, I think the playbook today, like I said before, is to try to pit everyone against each other. And like the best organizations, I think, take that divide or whatever's being, and they squash it. And so I don't know how I got onto that, but I was just thinking about Shea, and like he's so great because he I think wants that. You know, the big thing with him is, you know, he's got to be a two-way player to be great. He's got to be, and he took huge strides in that. But he's got to play both sides, and if he becomes a great defender, that's a problem for other people, you know. So I'm really excited to just observe how he continues to improve, and then how we can continue to help him, you know, explore his potential. But you got to do that together.
Yeah, you might have just answered a follow-up I had, but it was he's come back every year a better player.
Yeah.
And he's talked about how much he works in the offseason. Is it kind of that continued improvement on the defensive end that you're looking for, that he could sort of build upon next year? How could he even be better than he was this year?
I mean, when you have players like that, the better you are, the more ways there are to get better. And so I think there's a lot of room for him to improve. He's so young. So, but things will come. I think that's one other thing about player development is you got to let it happen a little bit too. So I've become fascinated by two things, like editors and music producers. So I read this book about Max Perkins, the editor, and it was awesome because it helps you understand, like, he's helping these tremendous talents, you know, F. Scott Fitzgerald and many others. And it's hard to tell them when something isn't to their level, right? But necessary. And when you have someone that's that talented, there's more coming. There's more in the stew that you can then be more critical of. But the best ones are like, give me more. But you can't do it all at once. So he's going to there'll be certain layers, as my guess, we'll work on with him, and he'll figure out what he wants to achieve. But you have to understand, what do they want out of it? And like, what do you want? You can't be dictatorial. I think, you know, we've learned that over time. And so he'll come back a better player. I just think defensively, if he continues to progress this way, it can make him it's another dimension.
Everyone talks about culture, and that was really evident a couple days ago with the end of season interviews, and really the last few years too. Can you kind of talk about that dynamic?
Yeah, so I think we've been fortunate, obviously, over the years in that respect. I think that word is like just absolutely abused today. I think it's more environment than it is culture. I don't know. I guess everyone's definition could be different, but I think environment is better because environments change. I think as good as it is here, in terms of like what you're describing, everybody's happy. It seemed like that at least, but you know, not everybody's happy, but they, you know, they know it's good. The one thing about it that I have always thought about, and I've said this recently to our leadership team here, is cultures or environments, they're not static. So we've had tough times with that. like environmentally. Like that, I think every single situation would have that. I think a lot of times when the team is winning at a high level, their best environmental days are usually prior to that, because I think there's a huge difference between a culture of winning and a culture where you can win. And we've always focused on, like, you know, trying to create the best environment for people to be their best selves. But that gets stressed sometimes when you're in an environment like pro sports. Like, it's not going to be perfect all the time. And I think when you realize that, it can ebb and flow at times. So, yeah, right now, I would agree with you, Nick. Like, the environment's pretty good. The guys are great. But it doesn't mean we own that, because there's going to be periods where that gets stressed. That doesn't mean you have a bad culture. It means the culture is going through a test of some kind. And I think if you have the right principles, if you have the right ingredients and the right people, you can regrow out of that. Even in times where it seems like, man, like this is not the way it was. Nothing's the way it was. You know, it doesn't go that way. So we'll be tested. There'll be tough times. If we have the right group and the right temperament, we'll survive that. We'll be stronger for it. Like I said, the sky falls twice a year on every team. And, you know, you get better as you go through that. And I just think the same thing about environment. It's not, we like to say, well, these people have a great environment. We tend to say that about teams that are winning. Right? But it's much deeper than that, in my opinion. And it can go to any business, industry. You know, there's teams that could be winning, but they may not have a great environment. But you don't own it. You try to do your best to curate it, keep it, you know, but it's going to go through tough times, and we've had that ourselves. And I don't want to act like everything's perfect. It isn't. But I do think that over the course of time, you can get it right most of the time, but that doesn't mean that you like own this pretty little picture. That's not human. I don't think that's human. If it looks like that, then I think it's actually their biggest indicator. If they haven't had tough times, there's something else going on. It's the Truman Show. So,
kind of a follow-up on that. We talked about drafting the people over the player, and it doesn't seem like that's played out more than it played out this year, especially considering how young the team is and how they could have let their personal agendas get in the way, especially because this is the time that kind of shapes their career. So how pleased were you to see that play out that much without, because they talked about how close they are all year?
I mean, it's impressive. I have to say, I think their ability to think for themselves is very, very impressive. I think they're aligned towards wanting to achieve team goals. That doesn't mean individual goals aren't very important. They are for everybody. Ambition's important. It just can't overtake the meta goal of team success. And so, the thing I'm happy about is that a lot of guys did get recognized, right, as a result of those priorities. You know, when we talk about those things openly, and which I think is important, you know, the risk is somebody doesn't get what they want, and, you know, nobody really gets what they want, but, like, I thought guys were recognized for their contributions, and I'd like to think it was a result because they served the team, and that's one of the things. Serving the game, serving the team, making the play that's in front of them naturally. And I think that if that continues to become more and more part of our ethos, it only makes the team better. And that's the best basketball. You know, the best basketball is when things are synchronized. You can't get that all the time, though. Like, nobody plays 48 minutes. But if you watch really good teams, they have these pockets of that where the best versions of them, like I said before, and everybody understands their function. No one's trying to redefine it or expand it. It's really fun to watch. And you can see, it's also very fun to play. And so, but that's a hard thing to do in any sport, you know, because everyone's a person, and you have to manage all these other things, but they've done a nice job with that. They deserve a lot of credit, but they're going to have to, you know, we all are going to have to double down on, okay, this is kind of where it's at for us to be at our best.
What did you learn this year about Josh Giddey?
Oof. I mean, a lot. Age is a number. You know, age is a number. There's one play that stuck out to me this year with him. And I know when everyone thinks, and we talk about him, it's going to be some wizard pass or something. It's not. Because I think that he serves, when he's at his best, he serves the game, and he's able, because of his abilities, he's able to impact the game in a lot of ways. We're playing Chicago. It was the very end of the game. I can't remember the possession. I was kind of I was at a college game. So I was like, kind of like breaking the rule and like kind of looking. It was a close game, so I was kind of looking at the game. Big possession, huge possession. He holds off Pat Williams and gets the ball, and I think we may have got fouled and gone to the free throw line after that and closed the game out. But that rebound was a winning rebound. That was a free-for-all play, and that was a nasty play, you know, and he held him off. And, like, those are the plays that serve the game that you make, but not a lot of people will probably write about them or tweet about them or highlight them or whatever. That was a big play. I was impressed by that. Just the strength to be able to do that and to understand the importance of that possession, you know, and come through like that. Had another one. God, I'm really bad at this. Tracking down that jump ball, that Lou one. That's a winning play. He doesn't get a stat for it, but that those are the things, you know. Being 6'9" helps, and with really good instincts, that's a good combination.
It appears Tent's recovery is going well, trending well. What are his plans in the offseason?
Just keep progressing. You know, we want him to keep progressing, see how he continues to do. He's moving into like 5-on-5 play. So he's in a good spot. We just don't want to, you know, obviously get ahead of ourselves. We have no reason to do that. But I think he's in a great spot in terms of what he's been able to accomplish. Again, I think everybody learned a lot this season. Like I said, that's the key to the year for us, is the rate of learning. But for him, he learned a ton because you're going from just the day-to-day approach that's necessary to come back from something like that is one thing. Walking into a building where you're seeing everything else that you want happen in front of you every day and still stay that consistent, not many people do that. I feel good about that one. He's got a mind that's different on that level. We're gonna have to do a lot of work on, you know, eat the bread in slices, not the whole loaf at one time. You know, build the house slowly, because he's so driven. But that's a good thing to have to help cultivate over time. It's possible. We'll see when we get to that point. If he's at that point where we feel good about making that decision, I wouldn't say he wouldn't. It's very possible that he does. But he's got a lot of time before now and then. You know, he'll want to play for sure, because he'll play anywhere, anytime. You know, it's just a matter of if it's the right thing for him physically at that point. The other thing I just add about that is, like, the hardest thing in my experience with these jobs that I've encountered are the injuries. And I don't mean the what they do to the team, but like for the players. You know, it's just, I've been in too many doctors' offices, too many exam rooms, and when these guys go down with injuries, I wish people could see, like, the devastation, how much these guys care. I mean, they're really warriors. These guys are warriors. they are warriors. And so when one of them is taken out of their ability to do that, man, it's a crusher for me. Like that's the hardest thing I've probably had is I don't do well with that because I just don't it's hard. I mean, I care about the guys obviously as people, but Eric Mayners was I was hard. We were in Atlanta and just remember seeing him on the table. It's just brutal. Chet's was tough. Surge's, we were across the street. Now, he had the most miraculous return from an injury I've ever seen in my life, but it was like it was like a movie where you think someone's on and they like kind of pop up. It was crazy. We put a press release out. The season was over, and Pop thought he got all over me when he came back. I was like, we really thought the season was over. We put the press release out. So I don't know what happened. Serge is superhuman. But we thought his calf had exploded, and it did, but he just So the injuries are tough. Obviously, we've been through them with a lot of guys at a lot of different levels of the team, but it humanizes the players. And like I said before, the players are the most important thing. There's a reason why the middle of our building is designed to have the court in the middle, because the players are what make it go. It's what makes the league go. They're incredible competitors, and they have a short amount of time to do this. But at the same time, you still got to challenge them and be with them. But when they're injured, it's hard. And Chet was a hard one, because I think he knew something was wrong pretty quickly.
Yeah, Sam, when Chet did go down, all eyes were kind of on the 12th pick, Jalen Williams.
Yeah.
Can you kind of talk about your expectations for him then? And then, did you expect him to be a potential Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, I'll always say this, Adam. I don't know. None of us know. You try to shift the odds in your favor and make quality decisions, but there's a lot more to it than watching guy on film. I will say that. There's one. There's part of it, it's there's a difference between evaluating if a player can play and knowing how to use the player. Those are two different conversations. The other part about evaluation is that what's going on in the evaluator's mind? Because there's so much bias in the evaluator himself or herself so they could be walking into things, they're already thinking a certain way. What's the process leading up to the evaluation? How consistent is that? Are you just popping it on? Are you doing the same thing every time? How are you documenting? How do you know how well you're doing? What kind of notes are you keeping? Are they being measured some type of way, empirically? There's a vast concept to player evaluation. And the reason why there's all these different aspects that you try to optimize for is because it's so random. Because at the end of the day, I don't think anybody really knows better than anybody else. I think there's a lot of components and factors that go into it. And with J-Dub, we made what we thought was the best decision for the team. But then a lot of other things have to take place for that to get to this point. And we're only 1 year in. So just because we've had a good first year with him doesn't mean the second year is promised to go the same way. I would caution that because in the beginning of this year, there was a lot of people that were very concerned about Josh's play. And again, regression is welcomed. Resistance is welcomed. That's how you improve. Now, again, I think it's okay to be a fan and overreact to things. That's part of being a fan. I'm a fan of other sports, right? But you got to have clear thinking when it comes to player evaluation and player observation. And these guys are going to get better, and they may slow down, and they may get better, and they may struggle, and they'll go through different things, and they'll respond to them. You got to do your best to kind of just watch it happen and understand it. Try to understand it accurately. That's the key, is understanding it accurately. Go ahead.
He also has a real, I want to say, bubbly yet carefree type of personality How much do you think that plays into his success on the court? It's like he's playing like that on the court as well.
But I think it all goes together. So again, I think it would be impossible to watch a player on film and like make a determination of how good they are without knowing or meeting the person. I mean, that's you're missing maybe the most important part of the evaluation. So yeah, if you don't know the human component, I think you're missing majority of what can go inside a player. So Jalen specifically, I think his personality does make a difference. I think he has a certain disposition or temperament. Most impressive thing to me about him, and I know everybody else has different opinions of it, he plays with great effort on both sides of the ball. And he goes hard. And I don't think people should ever take that for granted. If he's still bringing that level of force and effort 3 and 4 years in, he'll be a significantly better player than people think he will be now. And I think he's a smart guy. I think he understands that. I think he understands how hard it is to do that every night, but he got off to a great start. He got off to a great start with that. All the other stuff is great, but there's certain things that are worth more, in my opinion. And that's one of them. You mentioned what were our expectations? Professional habits. When we get a first-year player, that's our primary focus, is we want to get them professional Thunder habits. And we can't really start with much past that, but we got to get that in place. Harder for some guys than others. Other guys just like slide right in and they're born here, you know? But I think we can show them that we can work with anybody if they'll work with us. And, you know, that doesn't mean they're going to turn out to be a really good player, but we can help them, and I think hopefully help them have long careers after, even if they're not playing here for the rest of their career.
Sam, you talked a lot about the things that can get in the way of young teams, like during the time period of the season. After kind of being ahead of the beat, as you said earlier, there's some things that are different in the off season that your guys are going to have to be really focused on maintaining kind of that same mental discipline when they're not together all the time.
Yeah. Well, that's a big part of it. Like, those guys are, you know, they'll do their own thing. They'll come back here. We'll find out who's improved. We'll find out how that fits into the construct of the team. I mentioned the music producer thing. I'm really into this because I like music documentaries, and I love the ones about how the songs and albums get made. So I think there's a good analogy there of every year we're going to come back, the team's going to be different because guys are going to get better. And so if you have a big soundboard in front of you, like George Martin, Brian Eno, these are the guys that I'm really into, and Quincy Jones, another one. You can't have everybody turned up to 11 like it's Spinal Tap. It just doesn't work that way. You know, sometimes in order to get the best component out of the team, someone might have to come down a little bit for someone else to come up. You can play all the right notes, but the song may not sound good. And I'd like to see us continue to, and I think Mark and the guys are so, they're so invested in this. I think it's bodes so well for us, finding the right balance as the team continues to grow, and depending on who's on the floor with one another. But that's not like a static thing. That's a changing thing. That's the beauty to me of watching and observing the team, is to see how we can continue to do that. But it's no different than figuring out, you can't have one thing cranked so loud that nothing else can work. You know what I mean? And I think the play style that we're the ideal we're chasing with that, I think is a fun thing to try to figure out, but it's not something you like can just master. The good thing I think is we have good improvisational players, which helps. You know what I mean? And so they can absorb. Like, I think the guys did a great job absorbing Jalen's emergence. The coaches did a great job absorbing. We're gonna Chet's going to come into the fold next year. Like I said, we go back to square one. We'll have to continue to kind of observe and figure out how to mix that well. Because at the end of the day, it's not about getting the best personal performance. It's about getting the best performance of the team with everyone playing well.
One more. After seeing Chet Holmgren go down in the offseason, how were you able to not panic after that happened?
I mean, I think probably temperament and experience. I mentioned the injury thing. I mean, the first thing is it's tough for the guys. Like, it's really tough for the guys because it's just crushing. I can't put that into words for you. But then you also have to move on with the team. So it's a tricky thing there too, because you can't have the team looking back. They have to move forward. But I think just being in enough situations, seeing how this goes. I mean, you wait for more information. I guess I know I don't want to be dispassionate about it, but for me, my temperament is like, give me the information, and then we'll work from there. But we can't change what happened. But you can also be very disappointed for the person, because this is their their passion, it's what they love to do. So, but I think probably like temperament, and we've been in a lot of tight spots over the course of time, and I think through temperament, optimism, belief in one another as an organization from top to bottom, we feel like we'll figure out what's next and how to implement that, and not really get caught up in like all the different things that could go wrong. Like, let's get the next thing right. Let's figure out how we operate from here. And that, to be honest with you, the big part of that was making sure we got to the right, the right medical opinion and the right information and then the right plan, and go from there.
Sam, one more on J-Dub. I know he was like a late riser, but a lot of the even projected first-round picks don't play 5-on-5 in the combine. And Mark talked about seeing him do that. And when I asked J-Dub about it, he was like, I didn't even know any better. I didn't know that some guys didn't do this. Like, did that stand out to you? And what do you remember from watching him play competitive games in the combine?
I hate this joke because I buzzkill every question you ask. But I got to tell you the truth. I don't think my feeling on this is you can't control who plays, who doesn't play, what you get to see, what you don't get to. You work with what you got. So I guess it was nice that he played, more information. If he didn't play, I wouldn't have held that against him. It's always good to see the guys compete. You'd always prefer to see that. But we don't control that. So it's like, can't bend the world to be as you want it to be. And you kind of have to either work with what you got, work with the world as it is, or get crushed by it. So I read that. And so, hey, he played. That was great. It probably helped us. But meeting him was a big factor in, that interview process, I think, is important. The visits, those types of things, or being able to go out and visit the player, just meeting the people, I think does make a difference. But I don't think it played like a huge factor. It's like, show me what we got to work with, and let's see if we can get the right priority for the guys who will be the best Thunder players. What's that?
I don't know if you can even talk about it, but if you can, what are your thoughts on the new CBA?
I can't talk about it until it gets approved, and it's in the process of that. The only thing I do feel comfortable saying about it is that I think the NBA and the Players Association have shown what it should look like, or what it can look like to have that type of leadership. Because this was not an easy thing to do, and they did it. And I think they did it with a really impressive level of collaboration and spirit. And so I can't comment on what's in it, but I can just say that I think we're fortunate to have the leaders of those two entities working together, because you can't take that for granted. I think they found a way to do something that is best for everybody.
Talk
Week in
about
the
this.
playoffs, you had some guys get hurt taking charges.
Say that. I'm
The
sorry.
first week in the playoffs, you had some guys get
Yeah.
hurt, the charge call. And there's some talk that they should kind of amend what a charge is, maybe make the restricted area bigger. Of course, I say this, you got one of the best in the league at taking
Right.
charges. What's your thoughts? You like it the way it is, or maybe it changes?
Well, I think what happens in the NBA is we watch thousands and thousands and thousands of games. But when we get to the playoffs, everyone's watching the same games. And so the groupthink is like multiplied by a million. And when things I think probably these same things are happening throughout the season, or maybe if it happens to a high-profile player, it's reacted to a little bit more. I mean, when one of our guys during the season steps on the cameraman and twists his ankle, we're not calling for rule changes, you know. But I think if it happened on a primetime game, maybe, you know. So the only thing I'd say about that is, and I don't know how much easier you want to try to make it for the offense. I mean, we've taken away every potential thing. I mean, unless we just want to have a 5-on-0 game and just see who shoots the best. Like, at some point, you're going to need to have the defense play and be allowed to play. And I understand, like, you could also make the argument that maybe guys will not go in the paint quite as much because they're, you know, we're taking the obstacles away, is what I'm saying. And so, and this has nothing to do with Jay Will. We've had Collis, we've had a lot of charge takers over the years, but I just think it's less of, if we need to do that for some reason, fine, but I just think it's more a question of, like, how many more limitations are we going to place on the defense? I mean, I think that's just a real question for the league. What kind of game do you want to have? Is it an offensive game with a little bit of defense, or do you want it balanced where both sides of the ball are being able to play, you know, a certain way? But I know what will happen is this will get, if there's enough, the medium matters more than the message. If it's made its way to social media strong enough, it's going to get talked about because that's the name of the game. And so I'm sure there will be meetings about taking away this thing, but hopefully if we can find ways to help the defense be a part of basketball too.
Sam, can you talk about Ousmane Dieng and evaluate his season?
Yeah, it was a little choppy because the middle of the year he had the injury. The one thing I feel comfortable saying about him, because we're early days with him. I mean, I think we all understand, like, you know, this was going to be there's going to have to be a longer period of observation just because of his age. He's just, I mean, he's Poku level age. You know, that's how early in the league he was. He takes challenges. He left France and went to New Zealand. He entered the NBA at an extremely young age, being a player that doesn't speak perfect English. I like that. I like the fact that he's taken challenges, he's taken risks, and he's bet on, like, his own, you know, his own being, you know. So we'll see where that leads us after. You know, it's another summer. It's a big summer for him, but these are guys that are going to look significantly different over time. You know, physically and this also game wise. I thought he got better as the season went along, but you know, like all of our guys, he has a lot to work on. But he knows where the ball should go pretty easily. Like, in terms of his cognition of the game, it's high. It's high. The processing speed is high. It's just, you know, we have to continue to help build a whole player. And he has to put the work in. And he has to challenge himself. But I've noticed that he will put himself in those situations. The easiest thing for him to do last year would have been to not to go to New Zealand, to stay in France, where things probably would be made a lot easier for him. So I like the path that he's taken because it's definitely not the least resistance, and, like, we're big on that.
You talk about style of play, you talk about like less pattern, more rhythm. Just what are your thoughts on the progress, like kind of toward that style of play that Mark and the guys made this year?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've hit it a few times, but it's definitely progress. I think some of the shooting numbers are a little bit indicative of that, because we're getting quality shots, but they're makeable, you know, because people are anticipating that the ball is going to be there, and it's not the first time they touch the ball. You know what I mean? I think the mixing board example I gave you, I should have saved that for this question if I knew this was coming. The mixing board example is finding the balances within the guys with a changing team as the guys keep getting better. Because as I said before, the J-Dub we saw at the beginning of the year is different than the end. The Shea we saw at the beginning of the year is different at the end. These guys are all going through development and change. And so that's why we've felt that doubling down on those opportunities was important so that we can continue to get more information about where they are. And then how do we best deploy them and in what structure so that everybody's playing well at the same time versus like one guy's playing well, but in order for him to play well, no one else can play well. We want it to be everybody playing well at the same time in the more modern NBA. And, you know, you could make the argument that the team we have right now wouldn't have been a very good team in the NBA 6 or 7 years ago. And you could take the teams that were in the NBA 6 or 7 years ago and put them in the NBA today. They may not be very good because the NBA is always changing. It's always changing. That's the great thing about it, is that the players change the game, you know? And so we'll have to keep riding that and not – my big thing is don't try to, like, box that in or put a bow on it. Like, that's the beauty of the team we have. We have a lot of different guys that know how to play, that have good natural basketball instincts, that have pretty good size. We can put them in a lot of different situations. We want them to think on their own. I mean, I think Mark is really great about that. But we also have this ideal of playing really quality basketball, but they have to kind of figure that. That's what I think Mark's done a great job. He lets them play. He really does. But he wants to continue to teach them how to read and react to different situations. And that's not just the actual, like, the pattern of the game, right, is like more fixed. The rhythm is like just kind of the way that the players are interacting with each other, where it doesn't have to be fixed. And I think it helps that we have some of the guys that they can decide where the things should be going, you know, based on what's happening on the floor. That's really helpful, and that's scalable. The patterns are not scalable. They're not as adaptable. They're rote. And I think the world we're in also reflects the way the game is played. You know what I'm saying? Like, the society we live in is a reflection of the sport is a reflection of the society we live in a lot of ways. We played very small a lot of times this year. And believe it or not, most of the time the other team played small with us. And when you talk about the development of our players, a big part of the development of our players, if you looked at where some of the guys took off, J-Dub specifically, Josh a little bit, Isaiah, it's when we started playing smaller. So some of the stylistic focus is also to drive development. I thought having Horford here for the time that he was here really accentuated Shea's development because it gave him a different look on the floor. I thought when we started playing K-Rich at 5, that's when J-Dub's development really started to take off. So I know we'd like to have the perfect team and have all the size in the world, and we could have twin towers plus be able to do it. We're working on that. I don't know that that's really realistic, but it's good to have high expectations. But a lot of the improvement of the season was through the experiment of playing small, which then drove the player development pretty far. And I don't know that we would have found some of that if we were like, nope, we have to do this. the other thing we learned by trying that, and Mark would always say this to me, is people match up with us. Because, you know, when we were playing Minnesota, we rebounded the hell out of the ball. Like we had Karl Towns on J-Dub. That's good for us on most nights, right? I think people still watch basketball like we were taught to watch basketball like a long time ago. It's like big, small. They must rebound. They must not. That's just the game's not that anymore. Can't help people if that's how they see it. We got our ass kicked on the boards in New Orleans, but no one was talking about the size there because we won. And we won because we stayed consistent with certain things, and we had some good fortune along the way. You know, it's like that's how the games are won and lost. But I do think that the player development is aided by the rhythms, and then also who's on the floor to help these guys play a different type of game and explore their game. You know, probably at some point in time they'll have to learn how to play with different type of bigs on the floor probably. But early on, I think to get us moving and to get the rhythms that we're talking about, very important. And also, we're going to our third draft, so we can't have everything perfect. In general, like we're a work in progress. We're going to be a work in progress for a while. One, because like I said before, we're not a 500 team, but also because the team is so young that we're going to keep learning about the guys and having to figure out how to modify and adjust. And I think what Mark's done is he hasn't put a cap on it because of the play style, which is, I think, very helpful.
You got a World Cup coming up, Olympic qualifying. Obviously, Shea is a critical player for Canada, possibly a team that could maybe medal next year. How important is that piece of what he's about to go through for his development as maybe possibly going to the next level?
I mean, I think diversity of experiences, playing experiences is positive. I think it also has to come at the right time in the player's career. So, excuse me. And obviously, it's their choice at the end of the day. You know what I mean? We don't have jurisdiction to say you're not playing. But, you know, certain guys, if you're trying to get your career started or you're trying to build certain type of habits or you're trying to work on certain things, that may take priority over the competitive diversity. But I mean, Shea's going to play if he wants to play. I'm not positive where he'll end up on that, so I don't want to speak for him. But diversity of play is good. Different situations, different systems. I don't see that as a negative at all. Again, I think shocking yourself and stressing your team, stressing yourself is a positive thing as long as you know you have a baseline to come back to. If you're just kind of a Jackson Pollock version of a basketball player, that's a tough thing. I mean, you can keep your bags packed. You're going to be a journeyman. You know, you got to have some identity that you know. This is what I do to play well. That's a thing I learned from Collison. This is what I do to play well, you know, or I play well here and this is why. I think those are really important things for guys to understand as their career goes along. So the diversity is great as long as you have that like sense of self as a player.
Sam, we saw how important the G League was this year, with particularly Jay Will playing so good with the Blue early on, and then the second half being a valuable member for the Thunder. What's it like seeing that synergy between these two programs? And also, you mentioned before about the G League not liking the Blue playing in the Paycom. Is there any resolution there?
The second answer, or the second question, I'm going to defer on that. But we're doing our best, you know. The first part of that, I mean, it's at this point for us, we don't even see it's the same thing. You know what I mean? It's like there's no thin line. It's just, so it's great because I mean, half of our Thunder staff has probably come from the Blue. We have a lot of players, obviously. I mean, our head coach is probably our best example of, you know, that. And he truly, I think, had a huge advantage having been a head coach there and in our organization, but also just a lot of reps. So Jay Will did a good job down there. Oos did an excellent job down there the first part of the season before he got injured. Everybody's, it's a regular thing to play there for us. It's a normalized thing. Trey Mann was there, did a great job at the showcase. Like, I think guys understand that that's like, for us, that's like part of the development process, and an important one, because we want to see, like, again, competitive diversity. Like, how can you do in these situations? So I love it. I think it's a great thing. I think I do think that the G League has like a lot of potential that is unrealized, and I do think that in the future, if we're going to change the age limit, if the age limit were to ever change, I do think that getting the G League even more robust and maybe stronger could be a huge opportunity. So I'm a huge fan of it. I just think there's more there that we can all do for that.
Sam, you mentioned Isaiah a few times. Didn't really have the opportunity in Philadelphia, got that here. What was it like for you to see him sort of take off given that opportunity?
I mean, happy for him for a lot of reasons. One, he just got I think he's a good example of has a right mentality. He came in confident, but not impatient. Because if you're a confident person, you usually have some patience because you're not worried about losing. Your success doesn't seem quite as elusive to you. He's like, all right, I'll wait. Eventually, I'm going to get a shot. And he did. And he showed a lot of professionalism early on. And then when he got his opportunity, he played well. But he also plays physical. He does things that drive winning. He'll take a charge as long as those will be allowed in the future. But he took, take a charge. He'll get a rebound. He keeps the ball moving, but he finds volume threes, which with the makeup of our team, you'd like to think that if you can find the space, someone's going to see it. It's really hard. I think it's a hard argument for some of our guys. You can't. Josh Giddey can't come to the huddle and say I didn't see you. You saw him. You can see everything. So, like, I think those types of guys like to play. Like, we should be able to maximize those types of guys. And when we drafted Josh and even some of the other guys, I mentioned that why we were doing that was because we thought, and you can go back and check my words, we didn't know how good he'd be, but we thought he could help the play style and amplify potential, additions in the future. And I think that helps. The play style obviously helps. But Isaiah's confidence, I think, was, and his patience with the process was key.
Then with Poku, season was derailed by injury.
Yeah.
And he's still so young, so it's hard to get like a good idea of him. But now entering the last year of his rookie deal, can you kind of tell us where you're at with him now that a decision is coming soon?
I mean, what's interesting about that is if you were to probably go through the first part of the season and say, okay, what are the storylines of the first 30 games of the season? Poku 100% probably would have been one of the top 3, 4, just based on my anecdotal sense of things. And then you get to the end of the year and so many other things have happened that you kind of forget the progress of this guy's progress that he made. And that's not a criticism of anybody. It's just we're getting lathered with so much information, all the time that you kind of, things don't stick quite as much. Had a great year. He put himself in position through the summertime, and it was starting for us the first night, and that was after, I don't know how I would say he was doing at that point, because it's a different process with those types of guys, in my opinion. I think we're going to need a lot of time. Like, I would have told you, like, in 4 years we might know, but but we got to put him in all these situations. He's responded very well. I think I said that in the past. Like, he's responded well to a lot of circumstances. G League assignments, he always came back better. You know, he had a couple injury things. He's bounced back from things. His maturity is significantly different. I think he's more comfortable. His defense was on a different plane than we had seen the last time when he started, when he came in here. He was protecting the rim a little bit for us. So very happy for him. You know, I think he'll play national team. So which I think, to Cliff's point, I think that's a good thing for him. And we'll see where it is. But he's made his progress is interesting because within the seasons he's always had some choppy area because he's so young. But by the end of the season, you could always say he's gotten better. Even with a very short amount of time that he played this year, it's very clear he's a better player now than he was when he started the season. So I'm happy with him, and he's stuck with it. You know, that's not easy to do.
Sam, you taught us no shortcuts. Don't rush the process. Don't be beholden to a clock. But you also have 4 first-round draft picks next summer, which is in a way a ticking clock. Does the improvement and development and blossoming of this team change your outlook in any way on what you might do just in the next calendar year as it refers to those 4?
Yeah.
If you hadn't had some of the development of Santa Clara or Joe or whoever, your team might not be as far along. But you are. But those things did happen. You are better than we thought. Maybe whether you thought or not. Does that change what you might do in the near future with decision making?
Yeah. Fair question. I think the first thing I would say is that that's a long time away. So that's obviously we got to get through this draft, get to the next draft, and then we don't even know if all those picks will convey. But I certainly would probably want to know where they would be, right? So Houston, Utah, Clippers. Ours, yeah. Sorry. I know there's 4. You said there was 4, so I trusted you. There's 4. And so I'd like to know a little more about, like, where those potentially could be. This is the way I look at I anticipated that someone would ask this question. Not the exact one you asked, Barry, but just what do you do with the draft picks? Because someone asks that every year. The way I would look at this is, if you think one day you want to buy a house, okay, but you don't know where it's going to be, but you want to buy a house, you don't go out and buy the paint for it now. You'd rather wait to see, where's the house? How much paint do I need? What color? I'm going to have blue paint. I'm going to buy 10 cans. We need to know what the house looks like before we start thinking about, like, the cosmetics, in my opinion. We might know a little more after another 82 games, and if we're fortunate enough to get to the postseason, we'll know more information. We'll also know more about those potential draft picks. But I think we have to, for me, I'd like to see the team. I'd like to think that we won't have to look outside of the team to get a little better than we are now. But this is, as I said before, a lot has been accomplished in a short amount of time. To be where we are from where we started after 2 drafts, I'm very pleased with the players and the coaches, but we still are under 500. And we're going to be one of the youngest teams in the league. And we have a lot more work to do internally. And the more we do, the more understanding we'll have as to what potentially we might want to do to complement. But we are introducing a new player next year in Chet. And so I think we have to be willing to observe that and not predict, oh, this is exactly what we need to do. Having those draft picks, even if on paper it says, well, we don't have enough spots for them, that's a problem everybody would like to have. Like that's not, it's like saying I'm walking into a store and saying I have too much money. I don't. What's the problem? I have a problem here. Like no, so I would say we'll definitely figure that out. If the players are as good as you know you're saying, that's even better. But I'd still like to know what we're adding. And I use the Jeff Green example all the time, which is we had a nice team, a good team. We were a 50-win team on our way to another 50. But we could tell that we struggled in that era of basketball. Yeah, it's funny because if you took that team and put it now, you know where I'm going with that. People would be saying different things about it. They wouldn't be saying, you're too small. They'd be saying, this is the really good modern team. But we played certain teams, and that team, as good as it was as a 50-win level team, it just had limitations against certain teams. We needed some adjustments and modifications. But they were very clear what it was that we needed because we had seen it enough. We had a game of our own that you could identify with. And, like, our competency showed our flaws. I'd like to be at a position where I could say that. I think we've got a lot of things we need to work on. I think it's hard to say that there's one that we could go out and just say, oh, this is going to fix this. And then there's also just the organic nature of, like I said before, having to go through things and gain experiences to understand what we're even trying to accomplish. So I know there's a lot there. The other last thing I'd say on that is we've done a lot of, so we've built teams from the bottom. We've had to build a team from the middle. I think that was probably the hardest thing was when we lost Kevin and we were still, you know, that's a hard spot to try to move the net rating up from. And, you know, we've also had to sustain teams. We've traded away draft picks, quite a few. We've still owe some to Atlanta. We've traded 4 draft picks. We've hit the buyout market. I think Derek Fisher was one of the best buyout market ads that we've seen in a long time. He stayed with us for a couple years. We've used extend and trade. We've softly transitioned a lot of different things through the last 15 years. I'm confident that we'll know how to transition this particular dynamic. But one of the things that I've learned over the years through experiences, you just can't map it out so strictly that you think you'll be able to anticipate what you're going to need. You kind of have to let that reveal itself. Otherwise, you're taking a pretty big risk because A, you're giving things up in advance, but B, you could also be compromising the growth or development of somebody else or stifle what you have already. And so it's very delicate. I just think it's a super delicate analysis.
When you have future draft picks and some of them have restrictions on them.
Yeah.
You talk about you'd like to know what they are before you trade for them.
Not totally, but a better picture.
Right.
Yeah.
I would assume the team you're going to trade with would like to know that too. But in some ways, how do you balance the fact that right now, first round draft pick from Houston, even with a top 4 protection, that gets people interested.
I think it's less that. I think it's less the know where they are because we'll play risk. I think we've shown that. Like, one thing we're not is scared. So that is not the problem. It's more, what do we know about the team and being able to say, hey, this is what we do need. We know enough about the team, but if we were to do that at the beginning of the year, we wouldn't know about Isaiah Joe. We wouldn't know about Jay Will. J-Dub may not be in the position he's in right now. So I think we have to be careful about premeditating some of that. That's just my opinion. Now, does that mean that we would never consider? No, of course not. We consider everything. We look at everything. We're always considering those things and talking about those things. But I think for the most part, it's just hard to predict the needs because once you use it, it's very hard to go back to that. And also, I think there's a you could also be compromising what you have. The other big aspect of that, and I can't go into great detail, is a new CBA. So the value of those assets potentially, especially if the cost of our team goes up, those assets are extremely valuable because they're cost controlled and they're retainable. So it's also a bit of an economic equation where you'd like to see, like I remember my first couple of years here, we were in a similar situation and everybody wanted us to give the max to David Lee or Ben Gordon. And we decided not to do that, and we still had a hard time keeping the team together financially. But if we had done that, it'd have been, forget it. So it would have been, because nobody would have been able to predict the development of some of the guys we had. It just took off for us. And then, just the way that that CBA got written, unfortunately for the Thunder, it wasn't good. This way going forward, I think we have to see, obviously, if we have those types of economic crunches, but if we do, having the additional draft capital will be important to fielding a team. I think that's going to be important to consider too.
That said, are there any circumstances that could lead you guys to use cap space this summer?
Well, I mean, again, I want to be careful because of the CBA conversation. Got to let that happen. We're always we look at everything. You know what I mean? We'll look at everything, but we're not. We've generally been pretty conservative with how we've approached that and looked at ways to use it that may not be as orthodox. So, and I think that's for us, like, that's probably the way that we always look through that, the cap space through that kind of a lens, because you want to get maximum value out of whatever assets you're deploying, and space is an asset. So how do you maximize the value of that asset? Well, it might be different in certain situations than others, but we're not gonna. There's no like hard and fast. Like I said before, I was saying to Barry, we've transitioned. We've been in a lot of situations. Like just because we're in this particular situation now and the way that we're managing, doesn't mean that we've only done it this way. I think we've done it a lot of different ways. It's just been over a long period of time. Cap space for us has always been looked at through how do we get the most value out of it. It's not always by just like signing, X player. But we'll see. Eventually that might be the case. I would never shut off anything. I think that would be unwise.
How much do you weigh the current and most recent product when making draft decisions, especially as it seems like a core is starting to materialize?
You mean like your current team? Yeah. It all factors in. I hate to be vague about these things because like it's not intentional, but it's just, for me, it's a combination of left and right brain all the time. And I think you gotta be able to operate both ways. I think the key is, can you go left and right brain? But more importantly, do you know when to deploy each side? But I think if you're operating in one space with one limit, like one way, I think you're shut off. And the nuances of bringing all that stuff together, the current team, the player that you'd be adding, the personal component, the analytical component, the strategic component, all that stuff factors in. That's what I like about it. You know what I mean? But the processes are really just means to identify the best options, and then you have to pick one. And everything goes through that kind of process, but it's not just like a concrete process, and it's not just a subjective process. I think you got to be able to play in both of those worlds to come out with good judgment. Good judgment, I don't think, is a result of expertise. I think it's like experience and the ability to toggle between soft and hard skills. And that's what you're touching on is really the nuance of that in what we do. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of everything.
And at least from the outside perspective, Lindy went from kind of a feel-good story as the local guy who, you know, signs with the local team, and now he's playing, you know, important minutes in a playing game. He's got a team option, I think, for next year. Just what have you thought of his path, and also maybe moving forward?
I mean, I always say, like, those are the paths that we like. You know, we're not a yellow brick road, you know, program, and he's done a great job. I mean, I remember him showing up for open gym and, like, had a hard time getting in the games, you know. So he's just done a great job. You know, he's a good player, and I think he's figured out how to play well here. You know, he's figured that out, and he's not totally reliant on other players to help him, but he's figured out how to rely on the system to give him opportunities, which is a skill, in my opinion. But it shows you there's guys everywhere that can play. Like, opportunities is king in the NBA, really is.
When it comes to players, you'll hear different observations, you'll hear different discourse from draft people, scouts, media members in this room, and others about what a Thunder guy is, and we try to make inferences just based off, like, common parallel lines. But I just want to know, from your perspective, how would you describe what a Thunder guy is as a basketball player?
That's a hard question for me, because I can't. I'd love to answer it, but I don't think I'm not very concise in these moments anyway. This could be a bad one. This could really waste time. So I don't know. The other thing about it is I hate talking like that because it comes across like so like righteous and like, well, it's a certain type of guy. Like, good person, right? Same values. Hardworking, reliable, open-minded. You know, can kind of get over themselves and see how they can fit with the team. You know, give themselves up a little bit, but also still an individual. Because I do think you need these personalities that are different, and we've had some personalities that have been different. I do think you got to embrace the guys and their idiosyncrasies and their differences, but you should never shy away from that, I don't think. But you want those things, and then I think resilience are important. That's another important thing. But, you know, those guys just aren't walking around everywhere. You know, they're hard to find, and you don't need all of them either. Sometimes if you have someone that has that and another guy on the team that doesn't, but they have something the other guy doesn't have, that's what a team is. You know, a team is a group of people working together to solve that day's adversity. And you need a lot of different people to do that.
Are there any new updates on a new arena since the last time you spoke to us?
You know, that's the answer to that is no. That's really Mayor Holt thing. So I'd really defer to him. I know he's talked about it a little bit publicly, but I don't want to. I don't want to like step out of my lane on that. It's really his thing, you know. And I commend him because he's thinking forward about the future of the city, and I think that's what's driving his focus on that. But I don't want to talk to him talk about that without he's the one that needs to speak about it, I think.
Sam, Auburn's Jalen Williams declared for the draft. Is there any way we can get that?
Well, we have all these draft picks next year, in case you heard. So, yeah, I definitely can't touch that because of the rules. But I understand where you're going with that, and it's duly noted.
Have you found any advantages to having two guys with the same name? Were there any
Yeah,
situations where other teams were confused?
Oh, that part? No. But one thing that is absolutely critical to teams, and especially in the NBA, is humor. You know, I think you got to have some humor, and that has added a fair amount. Now, at a certain point, it starts to get a little tiresome, I think, for them, you know. But it's definitely brought some humor, and I think the way you deal with difficult circumstances and stuff like that. At some point, you got to laugh about them. And those guys, I mean, Jay Will walks around with a smile. I mean, he's plastered on. He's smiling all the time. So, those two guys can have a good time with it. But it's mostly everybody else, But it's fun. It's unique. We haven't had that before.
Thoughts on Lou Dort's season? He obviously struggled finishing at the rim and other aspects of his game, but then you get down to these last 10 games, like you said, you just really see his imprint.
Yeah, I mean he's such an important guy for us. The thing I've impressed with Lou about is I think he realizes his function. Like I was saying earlier, I think he realizes how important his physical presence is, his defense, his courage. I will say, and you've never really heard me say this before about individual awards or anything like that, because I don't think they're. I just hard because we're biased. You know what I mean? I think all our guys should win all the awards, right? But I mean, there's some people not watching the games if he's not an all defensive player, because if you talk to the coaches, he's the one keeping them up at night, and he does it in a way that's so consistent and not flamboyant. And I want him to feel recognized for that, because we're going to need him to continue to be that guy. And it's like anything else. If you're chopping wood all day and you don't get any type of pat on the back, we got to keep him going on that, because our team is drastically different without his defense. We're not a top 10 defense. We're not a top 10 offense. He's not going to be the reason we're a top 10 defense, but he's the reason why we're even hovering around it. We're going to need the rest of the team to drag us into the top 10. I think he's carrying more than enough. But if you just watch him night to night, or you have to game plan for him, now I can understand if you're watching a million games and you're just it's hard to watch, but he's a guy that you have to prepare for, every single game when you play us. And I know enough coaches in the league, and they all have a couple of same things they always say to us about. And they always say the same thing, and one of them is his name, always, And I just like the way he goes about it too. There's no pretense to him. He's not complaining all the time. We say we don't want the guys complaining. Well, he's not complaining, but he's also not getting the recognition. But he's a true competitor, man. That guy's he's a true competitor. I know Mark uses all different types of phrases to I forget what they are, but he's a tough guy.
Your top pick in these last few drafts has kind of had sporadic odds, but this year you have, I think, an 85% chance of landing at 12. Does that change your approach at all?
No, because I as I've said the last 2 years, this is so random. The year that we moved back, I did my media beforehand, because if we happened to move back and then I came back and said, don't worry, we're right where we want to be, no one would have believed me, right? So I think you have to have humility in the face of volatility and randomness, and you have to accept it for what it is. Maybe we'll get extraordinarily lucky. The odds are very, very sharply against that. I wouldn't plan on it. But certainly when we moved, when we ended up where we were last year, we certainly weren't taking any victory laps because we had nothing to do with that. I think you just have to always recognize how little you really control we really have over a lot of things. And so one of the things that I was talking to someone that called me recently about for some advice on something, and I basically said, the job is you have to be able to deal with aftermath. Aftermath. Get good at that. Recognize what that is, because that's essentially what you're working with, is aftermath. The aftermath of whatever it is that takes place, you have to come in and you have to organize, inspire, strategize, and ultimately lead out of that. And that can be good or bad. You know, there's aftermath to success too, because people start to forget that maybe not everything was their doing, right? So you gotta deal with aftermath, whatever it is that comes our way. But we'll deal with whatever the outcomes are, and then we'll just go to work and do what we always do and try to make the best decisions.
Last couple of years, the team has been the youngest team, and they've had to learn and grow on the fly. But Mark is also a young coach that had to learn and grow on the fly. Is there a specific area of growth that you've seen in his coaching style, or just him period?
I mean, probably a lot. The hard thing for me with that one, Daniel, is I've known Mark so long. Like, I mean, I remember him, like, I just have these, you remember the beginnings of your relationships, you know what I mean? So, like, it's a long time ago. I've watched him develop so much. But the best thing about him, or not the best thing, one of the best things is, like, I think he has awareness that of the things he wants to continue to improve at. I think that's what makes him good. It's what's matriculated him from where he started to where he is. I think it will continue to help him. The reps of just being in these situations, games, decisions, you know, plans, things like that, it's just really, really helpful because, you know, he's just gathering more and more of these experiences and you know, I think turning them into wisdom in a lot of ways. So I don't have one specific thing, but I think he realizes that I think he's good at understanding the sequence of building out a team, that it takes a lot of time, and that sometimes if you just reach for the closest lever, you're shutting off all your opportunity. And so being willing to kind of wait and watch that, and even if it's failing, like, okay, what are we learning from that? And not overreacting. You could have done that the first, as I said, I think we were only 2 months over 500. So there's majority of the season we were under 500, month-wise, obviously. There could have been a million different ways to try to shortcut that or not be as flexible at, like, learning more. But we would have probably not ended up where we ended up. And so I understand sometimes people can't understand that way of thinking, and they just don't follow the bouncing ball to that point. That's not something I'm really that concerned about. You know what I mean? The perception of what we do or how we do it says more about the individual than it does about us. Because everyone's perceiving it through their own history, psychology, or whatever. We're just trying to we've been very open about what we're trying to do and why. And that doesn't mean it's right, but it's not. I don't think it's just, if you can't understand it, I think it's more because of the way you think than it is about what we think.
Going back to when you talked about meeting him at Florida, I mean, he had no high-level playing experience whatsoever, Mark, and, you know, in his 20s, didn't have a ton of coaching experience. Like, what drew you to him?
I'll tell you the kind of the foundation of this is, I used to go down and watch practice or whatever, and have some questions about the players, Bradley Beal or whoever was there, you know, because they had good players. And then he and another guy on the staff, Oliver Winterbone, would ask, you know, hey, yeah, like, so it was like, we'll tell you about the players, but then they would, like, pepper me worse than this. Like, and so we would just talk for a long time about different things. They'd be curious about the NBA, the way we were doing things, why we were doing things a certain way. I'd want to know the players. They knew the SEC pretty good, so we just talk about just spent a lot of hours together. It's funny because one thing about Mark is he's a copious note taker. He's got all these notes from my conversations with him, and he sent them to me recently, like 2 years ago. So I'm like looking at all this stuff that I was saying. I was like, oh my God, what an idiot. That's and so yeah, so he's all these notes of all these people he's talked to. So, but yeah, that's how the relationship really started. And then obviously we hired Oliver. He was here for a while. He's now gone into player representation, or I shouldn't say that, staff representation. And then after that, I hired Mark, and he did the G League, and we spent a lot of time together because when we were in playoff series, he was always around. So, but he was never on the bench. So I'd watch a lot of the game in the back with him. You know what I mean? And we just talk about different situations, or when the G League season was over. Did a lot with the draft process. So I think just like, and he's seen a lot of things within the organization. He's been here for a long time. So there's a lot of corporate knowledge that I think that aids us. We can get right to certain things like quickly, you know.
The players will know who he is during the draft process this year.
Yeah, I think they will know who he is during the draft process. It depends. Sometimes like he'll do it. Sometimes he won't do it. It's a great opportunity for some of the other coaches. So like when we talk about development within the organization, we're talking about that with everybody. So it's not so like part of the reason Mark is because we put him in situations to run the draft stuff, or I took him with me to run a workout for a player that wouldn't come in here, but we ran it somewhere else. So he ran the workout with a couple other guys, and so just again, competitive diversity, professional diversity, just getting these different situations. So we want other people to get those types of experiences too, and a lot of times the summer is big for that. But yeah, I think he'll be well known at this point. And that he controls the minutes.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but you guys would have went like 78-4 if Aaron Wiggins started every game.
He mentioned that to me in the exit meeting. It's funny you said that. No, he didn't.
What about him is just like, I don't know, everyone associates him with having like a winning characteristic.
I just think with him, again, it goes back to I was answering a question about player evaluation. It's just how nebulous it is. Difference between like evaluating a player and knowing what to do with the player, those are big things, but the person is a big thing too. So I don't know how you could sit and rank a bunch of players without knowing anything about them. And so we have a lot of information on all the players because we do our work like every other NBA team does. We just heard really good things about him as a guy, stability-wise, maturity-wise for his age. And, you know, we've been fortunate that kind of some of those back-end situations, whether it was Lou or Wiggins, the probabilities in those areas, I'm sure everybody knows, like, you're into, like, below 1%. You know, like, it's low probability. But we try not to treat the decision like that, though. So, you know, we don't treat the decision process based on the, you know, probability of the success. He did a good job with us, and the biggest thing I could say about that is he's just very mature and steady. So he accomplished what he did at the G League, in the NBA, the same way he did at the G League. You know, and even coming through Summer League, I mean, he was steady, took things as they came, ready when called upon. I remember I was in the G League bubble. I think this is right. It was in the G League bubble, and Mark called me because I think Lou may have been injured, and was like, "I'm thinking about starting Wiggins. Well, what do you think?" And I was like, "All right." I mean, I think it was on a two-way. And it was just like, I think it's another example of like putting the conscious discomfort and like seeing the benefits of that. Everybody sees, oh, Aaron Wiggins has turned into a reliable player. But that's because we had to put him in situations where he wasn't to find out if he could be. And I think that's the beginner's mindset that I referenced earlier. I think for our organization, with our market, with our ethos and our ideals, that's kind of important to us. We can't really lose that. We need to be a little unorthodox and be willing to do things and take risk where it could go poorly and take the criticism if people feel like, you know, that's necessary. But the worst thing to do would be to not explore those things, and you never uncover the potential of something because you're so scared of what other people might say, even if they don't understand you.
Do you plan to play in 2 summer leagues again this year, and kind of what was the benefit of doing that last year?
We are. We're going to do both. More reps, different environments, more opportunities, you know. The hard part is you just can't play everybody the whole time because it's just the schedule's pretty grueling. But our guys they soaked it up last year. And I mean, we had to, you know, take a couple guys off the floor because they were just toast by the end. But yeah, I think it's great for us to do that. I'm a fan of doing that.
And then going back to the G League, you saw Andre come back to the floor and return to the organization. What was that like for you to kind of watch that unfold?
Oh, it was just amazing. You know, I mean, the part about that to me is like, you want to talk about a guy that this is what made him a good player. He's over himself. Like, most guys would not do that, but he wants to play. And he's a competitor. And I mean, I went and watched him practice, you know, some days, and I mean, you wouldn't know that he was, you know, a pretty impactful player in a Western Conference Finals team. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't the reason we didn't advance those years. You know, when the lights were bright, you know, and he would find ways to impact the game, and he's a great teammate. And it was a great teammate to those guys too at the Blue. So, just you know, he's one of the all-time teammates who I think we've had. In addition to being a part of a lot of winning, you know, I mean, Perk I think won 75% of his games while I was here, and with some help, but he flipped a bit of a switch for us and was a pretty important component. Because we were missing something, and it was clear, and we were able to figure that out. Dre, you know, again with a lot of help, but played his role exceptionally well, and he came up in some pretty big moments. Never backed down. Not a guy that flinches.
To follow up, you mentioned that first 50-win Thunder team, and then you just mentioned Perk. You mentioned Jeff Green as one of the guys, and
I'm feeling nostalgic today.
Yeah, very nostalgic. But some of the matchups against teams like the Grizzlies, the Lakers, the Spurs, and just lacking some of the physicality, and then you get Perk. I guess I wanted to ask: is it too early? Are you looking at other team constructions as kind of
that's kind of what I'm saying, and the fact that you're asking me the question is like a lifeline that I didn't explain it well. So let me try one more time because I don't think I did a good job with it. It's so early. I think when we were at that point where we were a 50-win team organically on our own volition, and the other teams were kind of, you know, composed to a certain degree, we were less known than those teams were, I think, compositionally, because we were still so young. No one really knew how good we'd be, but we were threatening you. I mean, we were 18 games over 500 after the first. When we got to 50 wins, anywhere 18 games. We went, it was a big improvement. I can't remember what it was, but it was pretty quick. I don't think you can look and say, oh, well, the West is down, or this team. I mean, because the West was not down, and then Kevin Durant just parachuted into the West. So if you're waiting to, like, for the seas to, you know, part for you, it will never happen. I also think that if you become impatient or reckless, you can, you know, storm storm the beach, but it may not be very wise to do that until you really are prepared to take on those types of teams, especially if you're going to expend a lot of assets to do that. So I wouldn't say we're looking at that, because the one thing about the NBA, and it's happened more and more, is things are changing very quickly, and that's why I think you have to be adaptable. And that's why what I said earlier in the open, I feel we're well positioned. I feel we're well positioned to be adaptable if and when we decide to make a decision or move ahead in a way that is unorthodox.
What books are you reading this summer?
Well, what am I? That's the end. It's someone has said uncle. So this is, was that a real question, or are you just trying to end the?
Both.
Okay, all right. I'll just do the last things I've read. I read this a book by Laird Hamilton, is a surfer. It was good. I'm reading a book about Brian Eno, the producer. George Martin, book about him, that producer. That was good. There's a book called Spark of Genius, or Sparks of Genius. Can't remember. Heard it. Someone recommended it to me. It's pretty good. I thought it was good. It talks a lot more. I'm really fascinated by the left brain, right brain, the toggling, and I think that that talks a little bit about that. There's more on the list. I'm coming up a little dry here, but and then we'll see. I'm sure there'll be more by the end of the summer. I'm sure, and someone will ask that maybe an earlier stage of the next press conference.
What's your good luck charm to overcome the 98.3% odds of getting the top pick?
Being at peace with the fact that you know that you have no control over it, and just not worrying about that. So, well, anyway, I just want to say one thing before we end. April 28th through the 30th is the Memorial Marathon. Okay, obviously yesterday was the date of the memorial. 28 years. That weekend is a big weekend for the city, because we have thousands and thousands of people coming in to run in that marathon. One, because it's an incredible moment of reflection that is important for our city to always remember. The other is that they have an opportunity to engage with the people here. So it's a great opportunity for people to experience Oklahoma and Oklahomans and the Oklahoma standard. So if you can, I would tell people, like, get out and try to support people during that race, because I think people walk away from all over the world with a real positive experience. Take your kids or take somebody, go cheer some people on. I think it's the kind of stuff that as a society we need to continue to get back to doing, and recognize that it's for an important cause, and it brings attention to the fact that we got to always remember, but also, it's an opportunity to demonstrate like what the people here are made of and why it's such a great place. So I just tell people, hey, get out there. We're going to have thousands and thousands of visitors. Let's make sure that they have a great experience and walk away feeling great about their experience here and want to come back. All right. Thank you guys for everything.